Good Monday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Lindsay Reiser in for Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, fallout. President Biden facing growing criticism this morning after a third batch of classified documents was discovered at his Delaware home.
The key question, the threshold question here is going to be, was President Biden aware of those classified documents?
Now, sources telling NBC News the president is growing frustrated with the backlash. What we know about the newest discovery and the investigation. State of emergency this morning, California bracing for yet another deluge as it races to recover from a series of deadly and destructive storms. A look at the damage so far as we track the latest where the system is headed. Deadly strikes, developing news out of Ukraine. This morning, at least 35 people are dead, dozens others missing after a missile attack by Russian forces levels a residential area of a key central city. We'll bring you the latest on recovery efforts as Ukrainians brace for more attacks. And closing curtain. It's a bittersweet time for Broadway as the lights go dim on several high-profile shows. Some of them are shutting down much earlier than expected. More on the productions leaving the Great White Way and what it signals about the future of theater. I know that was a story you worked on. I mean, Phantom comes to mind.
Yeah, Phantom. Although then they announced they were closing and then they kept extending.
Ticket sales have been good.
The tickets have been really good. It's hard to get a ticket to Phantom. So it is sort of an issue. If some shows are doing really well, others are struggling a bit. We'll take a closer look at why.
Looking forward to that report. All right, we're going to begin this morning with the latest on that third batch of documents marked classified from the Obama administration, which was found in President Biden's Wilmington home.
Over the weekend, the White House said those additional documents were found in a room adjacent to the garage where a different set of classified documents were found last week. This most recent discovery was made after attorneys had stopped looking and someone with security clearance picked it back up. The first set of documents was found last November, just before the midterms, in a Washington office that Mr. Biden used following his vice presidency. They've been turned over to the National Archives. The ones found in his home were handed over to the DOJ. A special counsel has now been named to look into President Biden's handling of classified documents. For the very latest, let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Ali Rafa, who joins us from Wilmington, Delaware. Ali, good morning to you. So first, what can you tell us now about this third batch of documents that were found? And are President Biden's aides still searching for potentially even more documents?
Yeah, Lindsay and Joe, good morning. We learned about this latest discovery on Saturday in two new statements from White House counsel Richard Sauber, as well as President Biden's personal lawyers, saying that this newest batch of classified materials, these new pages, were discovered Thursday, a day after that single document was discovered in an adjacent room to the garage in President Biden's Wilmington home. White House counsel Richard Sauber saying he discovered these additional pages himself after he was trying to transfer these documents to DOJ officials after President Biden's personal lawyers called him in to be able to do that act, saying they didn't have the security clearance required to be able to do that. But this is all leading to two more big questions that we have, which is, again, why did the White House wait several days after this discovery to publicly acknowledge this, as well as the question of if these personal lawyers weren't allowed to have the security clearance to handle these classified materials, why then were they allowed to search President Biden's home after they found those classified materials at the Penn Biden Center? These are questions that a lot of reporters are asking the White House. So far, we haven't gotten a response yet, you guys.
I mean, Ali, you mentioned some of the questions that are still outstanding. The White House has been playing defense over the past week since these classified documents investigation began and when it went public. What's the administration's stance regarding the documents and how the situation is being handled?
Yeah, the White House is taking this posture of transparency. They're saying that they don't want to look like they're interfering in this ongoing independent investigation by this new special counsel appointed by Attorney General Merrick Garland. They're saying that they want to give this the space it deserves, respect the space. And I want you to take a listen to a bit of what Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had to say in response to a bunch of questions about this back on Friday.
We have addressed this issue multiple times at length, and we have been fully cooperating with the Department of Justice, and now we will be doing the same with the Special Counsel's Office just to be prudent here and just to make sure that we are consistent. I would refer you anything that is related to this, as it relates to the review, to the Department of Justice or my colleagues at the White House Counsel Office.
The White House is pointing to the differences in President Biden's case versus his predecessors. Obviously, the Biden team immediately turning over these documents and reporting them as soon as they were found, versus former President Trump, who defied multiple subpoenas in the case of those classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. They're pointing to the fact that this is a much smaller batch compared to the hundreds of classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. But really, this lack of a full and cohesive response from the White House about questions that the White House and even Democrats are saying they're frustrated, saying that these are questions that the White House would be able to answer, that wouldn't interfere with the special counsel and counsel's investigation, rather. So there are still Democrats, even aides inside the White House, that are frustrated by the White House's responses to this as a whole.
So, Allie, Democrats are frustrated. We know Republicans are very eager to investigate the sitting president. They were before this. Now this gives them a new target. And over the weekend, House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer sent a letter to the White House Chief of Staff. Tell us about that and what the congressman's looking for.
So Congressman Comer is sending this letter to White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain, asking for the visitor logs to not only the Penn Biden Center, to President Biden's Wilmington home, asking essentially who may have had access to these classified documents during the years that they were there. Then you have House Oversight Committee Chairman Jim Jordan also launching probes into this, possibly calling for the politicization of the special counsel's office, of the Justice Department. This is to Republicans really the gift that keeps on giving, because as you mentioned, President Biden, the White House had been staffing up on their legal team, preparing for just an onslaught of GOP-led probes once the Republicans gained back the House majority, into things like the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, the crisis at the border. But this is something that the White House did not see coming, something that we can assume they're working behind the scenes to prepare for, guys.
Allie, what are the next steps in the special counsel's investigation?
So right now we know that the special counsel's office has interviewed multiple former staffers of then Vice President Biden, who may have helped pack up these classified materials in these boxes, whether they delivered them to either the Penn Biden Center or President Biden's Wilmington home. But as to the question of whether President Biden would be willing to sit down with the special counsel, that's something that my colleague Kristen Welker asked Karine Jean-Pierre on Friday and didn't get an answer. So there's still looming big questions about what the White House's cooperation is going to be moving forward, really how long this special counsel probe is going to last, and whether that could possibly impact the plans the president has to possibly make an announcement on a potential run in 2024, guys.
All right, Allie Raffa in Delaware. Allie, thank you so much. Californians are bracing for a final round of heavy rain following a series of storms that have brought major destruction to the state. President Biden has already approved a disaster declaration to help with recovery efforts, but more damage is expected in the coming days. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin is in California with the latest.
Good morning. We are here in Capitola, where behind me several businesses have been boarded up because it is just too dangerous with all the rain that has come, the powerful waves here along the coast. Over the last few days, we've experienced a lot of rain. The latest system that came through overnight, a little less severe than others, but still there's the potential for mudslides and downed trees. A lot of communities that have been ravaged by these 10 atmospheric storms since Christmas are eager to dry out so that they can start to rebuild. We know that the emergency response director here in the Santa Cruz area says that there are about 1,000 residents that are in need of funds to help rebuild. President Biden has issued a disaster declaration for this area, including Merced and Sacramento, that are going to help out those communities. Over the last few days, we've seen a lot of flooding. We've seen landslides. In Santa Cruz, there's actually one that's going to keep Highway 9 shut down for several weeks because they believe the road is compromised. The good news in all of this is that last system that came in overnight is expected to be the last of the severe weather, at least for now. January is expected to be pretty dry, which is going to give communities like this an opportunity to try to rebuild. Back to you.
All right, Dana Griffin, thank you so much.
With that, let's get a check at your Morning News Now weather forecast.
Meteorologist Angie Lastman is with us and has more on what's hopefully the last of the rain for Californians. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, we're eventually going to see that fire hose turn off, but not today. That'll happen here for Californians here as we get through the next couple of days, though. Here's what's going on satellite and radar right now. You can see just still heavy rain working through the San Francisco area, as far south as Los Angeles and San Diego, still dealing with the rain. They were seeing that moving onshore overnight. This is all part of that next system that we're going to watch to be impactful for folks in those areas as we get through the day today. We've already seen some minor river flooding near San Francisco, so that'll be something to keep a close eye on. There's still 7 million people under these flood watches and warnings at this hour, and this will likely continue through the day today. We don't have a whole lot of rain expected here. We could see some high rainfall rates at times, but it's more because we have that really saturated ground from those numerous storm systems that we've seen impacting folks there for weeks now. So as this system works through, the flooding potential will remain. Here's how it plays out. We'll see the lingering rain across California, even into the afternoon and evening hours today. As we look towards the snow, more snowfall expected for folks in the Sierras, and that'll be where we'll see still some gusty conditions as well, so we could see some whiteout conditions too. As we move into Tuesday, though, this system moves into the Four Corners area, and that's where we'll start to see some added snowfall for folks there as well. That's where we'll see some of the heaviest snowfall from this. Here's how those accumulations size up. Again, not crazy amounts of rain, but just additional rain that they really just don't need at this point on the West Coast. We'll still see that stretching into parts of Oregon and Washington, but then as we get through the middle of the work week, we'll start to see this snowfall accumulation stretching into parts of the Midwest and into the Great Lakes. That next system is working through parts of the Great Lakes here as we get through the day today, and then we'll see that secondary one work through as we go through the week as well. So 6 million people are under these winter weather alerts of some sort. We have advisories, watches, and warnings up right now. In the meantime, on the East Coast, and really east of the Rockies, really warm temperatures. We're continuing to see those temperatures running anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees above normal. We could see some record temperatures in parts of the South today as we near 80 degrees in Houston, low 50s for Charleston. As we look towards Raleigh tomorrow, or Raleigh rather, we're going to see 57 degrees, 21 degrees above normal for Nashville. And this is the kind of setup that we'll see going into the weekend. So rain and snow for the Midwest today, and of course that strong storm out west. But as we get into the next couple of days, we'll still see those scattered flurries in places like Maine as we get into the midweek and the heavy snow. But then the weekend looks pretty nice. Plenty of sun for folks in the south.
Never too early to start looking at the weekend.
No, of course. That's what I'm here for.
All right, thanks, Angie.
Thanks. All right, now let's get to a pretty scary near collision on a runway at New York's JFK airport. One plane was about to take off when another came dangerously close. The whole thing played out over radio traffic. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park spoke to one of the passengers who described those scary moments.
Delta 1943, cancel takeoff clearance.
A terrifying near miss between two passenger planes on the runway at New York's JFK airport.
We're talking all split seconds here, but the initial cognition was this is not going to end well.
This animation shows a Delta jet on the bottom of your screen in red, about to take off Friday the 13th. The pilot brakes moments before a possible collision with an American Airlines plane.
American 106 Heavy, we're departing runway 4 left. I guess we'll listen to the tapes, but you were supposed to depart runway 4 left.
The FAA released a statement saying Delta Flight 1943 stopped its takeoff roll approximately 1,000 feet before reaching the American Airlines aircraft.
Where was the miscommunication between the American crew and the air traffic controllers? The Delta crew was doing everything they were told to do.
How rare is something like this to happen?
This happens occasionally where there'll be a misunderstanding about an air traffic control clearance and somebody will end up having to reject to take off.
No one was hurt in the incident, but the Delta flight returned to the gate where 145 passengers and 6 crew members deplaned. Brian Healy was on board during the close call.
It was like a split second of panic that resulted in this audible reaction on the plane. I felt then adrenaline, and there was total quiet on the plane, and then there was relief when the plane came to a stop.
Delta issued an apology to customers, provided overnight accommodations, and is now investigating the incident along with the FAA and NTSB. A potential tragedy averted with just seconds to spare. Kathy Park, NBC News.
More developing aviation news this morning out of Nepal. At least 68 people were killed after a passenger plane crashed just moments before it was supposed to land. Both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder were recovered by search teams. Those black boxes could help determine what led to the country's deadliest plane crash in 30 years. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now from London with the latest on this. Molly, good morning to you. So do we know anything at this point about a potential cause, any information about the moments leading up to this tragedy?
Yeah, Joe, good morning to you. So we have seen two videos from kind of seconds before that plane crashed. The first video is about a 10-second clip shot by a bystander on a balcony. And I mention this because we've had an aviation expert look at this and kind of analyze it to see what can he actually tell by this plane. It's a twin-engine ATR-71 flying through the air. Clear blue skies, so weather was not a factor. It didn't appear that kind of the mountainous, really rocky terrain was a factor. That has been a historic factor for crashes in this area. The second thing that's very obvious, he says, is that there's no kind of catastrophic event in the seconds before it crashes. So there's no fire, there's not smoke coming off of that plane. What he does notice, and what's very obvious to the naked eye, Joe, in that video, is that the plane literally starts to roll. It banks left and then starts to roll about 90 degrees. Now, the aviation experts we've talked to say what they can get from that is that it might be evidence of an aerodynamic stall. All of that, though, is going to kind of come out in the investigation once they listen to the cockpit voice recorder, once they look at all of the data, Joe.
Molly, right now we know 68 of the 72 people on board were killed in the crash. So what's the latest on those 4 remaining people and recovery efforts there? And have the families been notified yet?
Yeah, Joe, I think you said the word recovery efforts. So last night, the search and rescue efforts at the scene of the crash were stopped at nightfall. They resumed this morning, but really, according to authorities on the scene, there's no evidence of any survivors. So 68 bodies have been pulled from the scene. 72 people total were on board. So it is assumed at this point that those 4 additional people will be confirmed dead, but there's absolutely no evidence that anyone was able to survive this crash, Joe.
So, Molly, I mean, we know these investigations take time. What happens next? What is it investigators are looking for in the coming days and the coming weeks?
Yeah, so this could definitely take months to kind of get to the bottom. Like I said, according to kind of aviation experts, a lot of the early factors can be ruled out. So it was not bad weather. It wasn't necessarily a tricky runway. One of the things that's talked about is this airport, Pokhara International Airport, recently changed locations, Joe, from the old airport to a new location just about a mile down the road. So was there confusion over where this plane was headed, where this plane was supposed to land? The really good news, though, also according to aviation experts, as this investigation goes on, is that Nepalese authorities have historically been very transparent with their investigation. So they will likely invite international investigators to join. There's already news that the French investigators may be heading to the scene because that plane, 3 years at that airline, 15 years old, was a French-made aircraft, Joe.
All right, Molly Hunter. Molly, thank you so much.
Ukrainian emergency crews are dealing with the aftermath of a Russian missile attack that struck an apartment building in the city of Dnipro over the weekend. At least 35 people have been killed, but according to officials, dozens remain missing. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Kyiv with more on this. So, Matt, what's the situation in Dnipro this morning? Are rescue crews hopeful they'll find any survivors?
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, first off, Lindsay, that number of deaths has actually risen to 40, with 75 people injured. And I really think, given what we're seeing from this terrible incident, that it looks as though those numbers are probably going to be climbing. Now, of course, the rescue workers are still looking for survivors, but the problem is that we're going on about 48 hours since the initial impact of that Russian missile into that residential building. So they're really not holding out a lot of hope that they're going to be able to find anyone else alive, though yesterday, amazingly, 24 hours after the missile struck, they were able to pull at least one woman out alive. So there is some hope that maybe people are surviving, or that maybe people who might have taken shelter underneath the building when air alarms started sounding, that some of those people might be able to be pulled out alive. But again, there's not a whole lot of hope for that.
Just incredibly heartbreaking video we're watching now. Matt, there were reports of more missile strikes across Ukraine, Zaporizhzhia, for example, the southern Kherson region. What's the latest?
Yeah, well, we've seen that constantly, and this is all missiles that are being fired at civilian infrastructure, specifically electricity infrastructure. Now, Luckily for the Ukrainians, they've managed to use, to great effect, some of those Western-provided anti-aircraft and anti-missile weapons that are provided, again, by the West. So, normally their rate is something like 75 to 80% of shooting down some of these projectiles being fired by the Russians from the Black Sea or from the Caspian Sea or from north, from Belarus. So, yeah, we are seeing carpeting of missiles raining down all across the country. This is a pattern that we've been seeing ever since the fall, and it looks as though Russia is not running out of projectiles, not running out of missiles, so this is likely to continue.
Matt, you mentioned Belarus. Russia and Belarus begin joint air drills today. What can you tell us about these military exercises and the reaction to this in Kyiv?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that has been very suspicious to the top brass here. We've been hearing from intelligence officials saying that it's unclear whether or not the Belarusian government would actually allow for their, country to be used as another launching pad once again, because it was back in February when the initial invasion happened, to send troops across the border, because Belarus is not all that far from where I'm standing right now, the capital, Kyiv. So if Russia decided in this new offensive that we keep hearing about from Ukrainian and American officials, that there could be some new offensive launched from Russia or from Belarus, if they decided to make another play for the capital, Kyiv, it would come from Belarus. But so far, it looks as though Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, who's a very close ally of Vladimir Putin, has been reluctant to commit his own forces. Now, that won't necessarily stand in the way of him allowing Russian forces to deploy from Belarus. So, yes, we keep seeing a lot of these trainings. Some intelligence officials told us that they're probably just training, but it's alarming because Belarus is very close and very close to the capital.
All right, Matt, thank you so much.
Coming up, a tradition returns. Baltimore is bringing back its Martin Luther King Day Parade, the first in 3 years. We're going to talk to the city's mayor about the controversy that almost canceled this year's event.
Plus, bringing greener pastures to a historically black neighborhood. We'll take you to Miami for the new efforts to build bridges by planting seeds. You're watching Morning News Now.
Hey, podcast fans, ready to unlock our true crime mysteries? Try Dateline Premium on Apple Podcasts. You'll get early access to originals, plus bonus content, and everything is ad-free. So head to Apple Podcasts now to subscribe.
Watch NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Stay on top of breaking news and the biggest stories of the day with NBC News Daily.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Morgan Radford.
And I'm Vicki Wynn.
I'm Aaron Gilchrist.
And I'm Kate Snow.
Get in-depth reporting from across the country.
What's your reaction to the president's comments?
And around the world.
Are Ukrainians continuing to make advances?
And ways you can take care of your health.
Who should be getting tested? And frankly, how often?
And your wallet.
Costs are skyrocketing. How to manage soaring prices.
NBC News Daily. Weekdays from 12 to 4 p.m. Eastern on NBC News Now.
Watch NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Join Hoda Kotb for season 3 of her podcast, Making Space. Listen now.
Watch NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Join Hoda Kotb for season 3 of her podcast, Making Space. Listen now.
This is what it looks and feels.
What's the latest? The bigger piece of the puzzle.
We begin tonight with breaking news.
How much water ultimately will be forced inland?
Whenever it happens, wherever you are, NBC News, streaming free now.
Hey, I'm Hallie. It's good to be with you tonight. There's another legal filing today, and I want to cut through some of the weedsy stuff. And let's just get to the point. They have started to vote on the PACT Act. If you're like, Hallie, stop speaking Washingtonese. This bill would basically give health care to veterans who have exposed to these toxic chemicals. So, Scott, I'm trying to make this as not DC as possible. The increased sort of anger that we've seen now in politics. I saw you searching for, I think, your microphone, Dan. You are.
I was trying to do it on the slide.
Live TV, man. It's okay.
We begin top story with that breaking news. This is just in. A lot of stories to get to. What do people need most right now? Did the state and or law enforcement drop the ball anywhere? Are we headed for a recession or a recovery? Migrant families now stranded in Mexico. What's the World Cup experience been like? The civilian effort is not just about fighting, it's also about helping.
Every night, it's your news playlist. Top Story with Tom Llamas. Streaming weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now.
NBC News, streaming free now. Hey, podcast fans, ready to unlock our true crime mysteries? Try Dateline Premium on Apple Podcasts. You'll get early access to originals, plus bonus content, and everything is ad-free. So head to Apple Podcasts now to subscribe.
Join Hoda Kotb for season 3 of her podcast, Making Space. Listen now.
Watch NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
NBC News, streaming free now.
The Martin Luther King Jr. Parade is making its return to Baltimore today for the first time since 2000. Now, this year's event had originally been canceled by the city's Art and Promotions Office, which instead called for a day of service. But that sparked a major backlash from leaders and community members. Joining us now to discuss the event's return is the mayor of Baltimore, Brandon Scott. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate having you with us on this important day. So, first of all, tell us, why did the mayor's office decide to bring the parade back after it had been canceled for that brief period, and what should people in Baltimore expect today?
Well, I thank you and Happy New Year. First and foremost, let's just call it what it is. The BOPA made a mistake by saying that they had no intentions on having a parade, which of course was very upsetting to me and to the residents of Baltimore. We agree with them that there should be a day of service, but I say that we can do both. We can honor Dr. King through his legacy, through serving throughout the city throughout the day, and we can continue our tradition of having a parade, which is why I decided for my office to take over having the parade.
So, Mayor Scott, in a tweet, you said that the theme behind today's celebration is going to be anti-violence. You wrote, quote, "My focus during the parade will be very simple. Hashtag we must stop killing each other." Tell us more about why you chose this to be the message for today's parade.
Well, listen, Dr. King was about peace, right? We all know that. And in Baltimore and in cities around this country, we still have been struggling with this disease known as gun violence. This hashtag for Baltimoreans is not unfamiliar from coming from me, as having co-led one of the city's biggest anti-violence movements for many, many years. We are talking about this because we want to lift that up again about how important it is that we stop, that we resolve our conflicts in a different way, that we deal with the flow of illegal guns coming into our city from other states. We stop talking about this in a simple way, but always lifting up that we must stop killing each other and treating each other the way that Dr. King would want us to treat each other, with love and understanding, and even when we have conflict.
How important is this parade to Baltimore, especially after going a few years without it?
Baltimore has such a rich tradition of parades and cultural events, but this one in particular, because of our history in the civil rights movement, is one that always brings everyone out. And after what we've all been through over the last 2.5 years with COVID, folks were looking forward to it. And even though we had to put the parade on in a short time, we're going to have what we're used to. We're going to have Coppin State University cheerleaders out there. We're going to have our Divine Nine fraternities and sororities out there. Our governor-elect, who's going to make history this week, is going to be out there. Our marching bands, everyone. The anti-violence group Like We Are Us, which is the sweatshirt that I'm wearing today. Our Safe Streets worker. Baltimore is going to come out to this parade to celebrate our history, but also to honor where we know we need to go for our future.
All right. We know you have a big day ahead. So, Mayor Brandon Scott, we thank you so much for taking a few moments to join us. Best of luck today.
Thank you.
More than half a century ago, one bustling Miami neighborhood was called the Harlem of the South, but it was gutted to make way for an interstate highway. Now, a new 33-acre green space project is looking to bring life back to the area. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas joins us now from Miami with more details. Guad, good morning.
Lindsay, good morning. This project would revitalize Overtown here in Miami, a neighborhood that has struggled through the decades. And it's only a few blocks away from the famous downtown area with the high rises, the museums, and the basketball arena. This project would connect everything in what could be a much brighter future.
When Bay Heights was 6, she swung from the branches of this banyan tree. She was surrounded by the vibrant center of Overtown Miami.
Nobody locked their doors. We slept all night with our front doors open.
Those Overtown memories the 84-year-old historian and writer grew up with are now a rarity. A predominantly black community known as the Harlem of the South that had a bustling downtown and nightlife rapidly became a ghost town, largely because of a highway project. In 1955, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act. Legislation would clear the way for the government to seize private property for public works projects.
Around about 58, when they were getting ready to do the expressway, some people already saw the handwriting on the wall and they started moving out. It was very bad. I don't know how else to tell you except that it was very bad.
During the 1960s, Overtown lost more than half its population and a third of its businesses. Overtown was sacrificed for what the government determined was necessary progress. Decades later, an expansion to the highway that still looms above the neighborhood brings new hope to this historical part of town.
So there's a lot kind of going on to explore.
Jessica Goldman-Strepnick and Trina Harris are part of the Underdeck's executive committee. This group is working to create a green space under the construction of the new I-395, a $53 million investment to build the new urban landscape.
It's going to be light, it's going to be airy, it's going to be full of landscaping and trees and green, lots of green. You're going to have bike trails, you're going to have walking trails, you're going to have art and culture.
A new use for an area overlooked for decades.
I've experienced some pain walking under the underpath when it was dark, gloomy, and walking as a child. Our committee is working extremely hard to prevent negative experiences that have happened in this community under these underpaths.
If approved, funding from the federal government could secure half the money needed. It would come from a $1 billion grant allocating funds to projects that reconnect communities torn apart by past federal infrastructure across the country. Derek Fleming co-owns the Red Rooster restaurant, which has been working hard to revitalize the rich history of the 1940s and 1950s.
There was a time where people would flock here. They had to get to Overtown, particularly for a nightlife, but then we were cut off. And so this is an opportunity to reconnect, to not just allow folks to flow out, but folks to flow in a very holistic way.
A new hope and a bright future for Overtown, no longer overlooked.
Now, the committee in charge is working with the city of Miami, and they expect to change the name of the project. As of now, it's being referred to as the Underdeck, but they're inviting members of the community to make suggestions to create a new name, and the construction of this area would begin after they finish the expansion of that highway project for what could be a much brighter future. Lindsay?
Yeah, a lot of hope surrounding this project. Thanks so much, Quad. Still to come on Morning News Now, growing concern about the dangers of teen drinking.
She was screaming, help me, literally, like it was these sobs of help me, mommy, help me.
When we come back, one family's warning and what parents can do to help. A recent report by the National Institutes of Health found that more than half of high school seniors in the U.S. drank alcohol last year.
And a separate report actually shows 90% of teens consume alcohol by binge drinking, using it essentially as a coping mechanism to battle loneliness and depression. NBC News health and medical reporter Erica Edwards has more on the warning signs for underage alcohol abuse.
15-year-old Kennedy has always shined in the spotlight. From the soccer field to center stage, her family cheering her on. But when Kennedy reached high school, her mother Jen saw her once bubbly, outgoing daughter disappear virtually overnight.
She was a shell of her former self within a matter of months.
In the fall of 2021, Kennedy's anxiety and depression reached a tipping point. She says she turned to alcohol and marijuana to cope.
I wanted to turn the noise down on the chaos in my life. I just wanted to feel okay for once.
At points, Kennedy was drinking every night of the week, finding alcohol at school and at home. She did her best to hide it before pleading to her mother for help.
She was screaming, help me, literally, like it was these sobs of help me, mommy, help me. And it was at that moment that I was like, I can't be angry at this kid. I have to come from a place of love.
A December 2022 report from the National Institute on Drug Abuse found 52% of high school seniors reported drinking alcohol last year, up from 47% in 2021. Another government report found when teens do drink, 90% of consumption is done through binge drinking.
The binge drinking is where we get really concerned because that's where it becomes even more toxic to your system and more dangerous.
Jennifer Dragonette is a psychologist and clinical services instructor at Newport Healthcare. It's alcohol, Dragonette says, that teens often use to combat loneliness and depression, which both increased during the pandemic.
It certainly is possible that a teenager has only alcohol as an issue, but more often than not, there's something else going on as well, like depression, anxiety, family conflict, maybe a history of trauma.
Teens at Newport participate in talk therapy, music therapy, art therapy, and family therapy, something Dragonette says is crucial to recovery.
When the family is involved, there's a much better outcome. Both for the sake of the family system, because we don't live as individuals, we live in systems, and also just for the support after someone's done with treatment.
Kennedy spent 5.5 weeks at one of Newport's inpatient centers. Her family zoomed in for therapy sessions at least once a week.
Without my parents, I don't think the treatment would have worked.
It's not just her problem, it's our problem as a family.
Kennedy credits treatment and her supportive family for her ongoing recovery.
People should know that healing isn't a linear process, or recovering isn't a linear process. You will mess up, I almost guarantee you, but that doesn't mean you're a failure.
Our thanks to Erica Edwards for bringing us that report. If you or someone you know is facing substance use disorders, please call the National Helpline. The number's on your screen. It's 1-800-662-HELP. Or you can text 435-748. This helpline provides referrals to local treatment facilities, support groups, and community-based organizations. Still to come, it is a who's who of the rich and powerful. After the break, what to expect from this year's World Economic Forum, the first full event since before the pandemic.
Plus, the trouble with touch screens, why some say new technology meant to make driving easier could be making the roads more dangerous. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. The world's rich and powerful are gathering in the Swiss mountain resort town of Davos for this year's World Economic Forum.
And this is the first full event in 3 years, and it comes as the world grapples with a multitude of geopolitical and economic crises. NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons is there now for us. So, Keir, set the stage for us here. The world's elite back together again. What's the theme this time around, and what's on the agenda?
Well, Lindsay, traditionally this is a gathering of people who believe in globalization, in conversation, but of course now they're meeting in a world of splintering and of, in many cases, isolationism. Let me just give you one example. Years ago, this place would be full of Russian oligarchs mixing with Western business leaders, not any longer. In fact, it is now impossible to fly directly from the European Union or the UK to Russia, and it's hard to see when that is likely to change. When we talk about a world where globalization seems to be over, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. And just think about this. Even during the height of the Iron Curtain, during the Soviet Union, it was still possible to fly from Europe to the Soviet Union. So this is a changed world, and that has implications for all of us, and that's what they'll be talking about here.
And Keir, as we understand, only one G7 leader is actually attending this year. That's the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. Do we know why that is, and who's leading the American delegation this year?
Yeah, the Secretary of Labor is leading the American delegation. You're right that many leaders who've come in the past aren't here. I think partly, Joe, that is because as the world, many countries face recession, I think a lot of political leaders, that the British Prime Minister, for example, think the optics of being in a place like this where rich and powerful people are gathering just doesn't work for them. The German Chancellor will be here, but as you mentioned, he's the only one amongst the G7 leaders who is going to attend. So I think there are political factors at play for many world leaders. That's not to say that there aren't many powerful people here. There are many business leaders and many of the wealthy. And 30% of the delegates here are from the US.
And Kier, this forum is frequently criticized for being out of touch. I mean, you have billionaires discussing issues like inequality. Can anything actually be achieved here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there will be so many people watching who will say, why are all these elitists up here in this Swiss mountain? What a strange and kind of extraordinary thing to do. And I think it is difficult for them to really answer that here. There are lots of panels and meetings talking about how to make the world a better place, how to solve the food crisis, for example, or climate change. But that fundamental question of how come you're flying in on a private jet to come and have conversations about climate change, I think those questions really haven't been answered by Davos, and looking ahead, that criticism is likely to continue. It's certainly surrounding this meeting this year.
All right, Kier, thanks so much. We'll be watching.
Now to a revealing high-tech road test that's measuring just how distracted we are when using those dashboard touchscreens in cars. They're in almost all new models these days, but are drivers able to use them and stay focused on the road? NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns put them to the test.
Inside this massive 24-foot dome at the University of Iowa, researchers are driving for answers. With giant touchscreens now in 99% of new cars, are we losing focus and veering off the road?
This right here is a simulator that mimics the forces of driving and allows researchers here to safely study everything from impaired driving to distracted driving.
Inside sits a car, and the dome sits on tracks inside a building the size of a basketball arena. As the subject drives inside, the machine accelerates, brakes, and swerves, mimicking real driving safely.
So you can go ahead, hop in, and then I'll show you the controls real quick.
Today, I'm the test driver.
Are you ready to drive?
I am. Oh!
As I hit the road, researchers ask me to enter my destination in the navigation system.
Navigate to 401 West Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway.
Look at this, my eyes veering off the road for more than 30 seconds, causing me to veer into another lane. You can see me cross over the dotted line.
Oh, did I get there? No.
A typo in the address, my eyes once again moving from the road to the screen as I try to get to where I'm going.
Using the tablet, navigate to NADS.
Here you see my eyes were off the road and my speed dropped more than 5 miles per hour.
And we're off to NADS.
And as we drive, we are constantly adjusting our lane position. Very unconsciously, we can drive. But as soon as you begin to look away the road, that begins to break down and you drift out of your lane, much like Dasha did in her drive.
Outside the simulator, Dan McGeehee, who oversees research here, gave me what should be an easy challenge.
And we need you to turn the fan up to defog the windows.
But all knobs and buttons are replaced by the screen.
Maybe I'd go here.
Yep, nope, that's the wrong one.
Nope, okay. Oh gosh. Something's happening. Okay.
So.
And here are the defrosters.
Right.
I finally found it, but my eyes were off the road for nearly 20 seconds. A study conducted by AAA in 2017 found that when they tested 30 different car make and models with built-in touchscreen features, all 30 were found to be dangerously distracting, with some drivers having to take their eyes off the road for as long as 40 seconds.
We can look away from the road for roughly 1 3/4 seconds before our car begins to deviate of the lane.
But researchers believe that whatever dangers touchscreens present are significantly less than when using a cell phone while driving. Here's me in the same simulator trying to navigate using a smartphone.
In Cedar Rapids, we're going to Kirkwood Community College. All right, already swerving. How did my interaction with the cell phone compare to the touchscreen?
Right, because you had a bigger target, your glances down and up were much shorter than you were with the cell phone.
Experts say the safest way to drive is to punch in any information while parked or use voice commands.
Navigate to Brooklyn, Iowa.
Ways to stay safe as car technology accelerates into the future. Dasha Burns, Iowa City, Iowa.
Coming up on Morning News Now, a final bow. When we come back, the changes coming to Broadway after several big shows close.
And another trend on TikTok. We're going to tell you what's behind hashtag CoreCore. Lindsay and I are going to try to figure out what the heck it is and what it signals about what kind of content users are looking for.
The red carpet was lined with some of TV and film's finest at the Critics' Choice Awards last night. Everything Everywhere All at Once topped the film nominations at 14, also took home wins for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay. On the television side, ABC's Abbott Elementary led with 6 nominations, claiming the coveted title of Best Comedy Series. The Best Supporting Actress category saw fan favorite wins like Angela Bassett for Black Panther, Jennifer Coolidge for White Lotus, and a couple of special honors were given out also. The #SeeHer award going to Janelle Monáe, and Jeff Bridges leaving with the Lifetime Achievement Award. And Joe, we were just talking, we're both a little behind when it comes to some of the biggest movies, but looking forward to watching them.
There's a lot to watch, and anything with Jennifer Coolidge, whether it be a scripted show or just her at an award show.
Her acceptance speeches are gold.
Exactly. Thanks, Lindsay. Now, the bright lights of Broadway are a little dimmer this morning. Yesterday, 6 shows took their final bows, and several others have closed or will close this month. Now, some, like The Music Man, were incredibly successful shows that had long planned to close in January, but others had to shutter because they just couldn't fill the seats. And that's sparking conversations about diversity on the Great White Way. It won Broadway's biggest prize last year, the Tony for Best Musical. A Strange Loop. But after Sunday, A Strange Loop will be out of the loop. The show about a black queer writer is closing because of declining ticket sales. A surprisingly short 9-month run for a big Tony winner. And it's not alone. Last month, K-pop took its final bow after a mere 2 weeks. The show, which centered on the popular Korean music genre, featured an almost entirely AAPI cast. When K-pop opened and closed so quickly, what went through your mind when that happened?
It was devastating, finally, to have that opportunity and then to see it just kind of snatched away. It was really upsetting for the community, I think.
Before the show closed, K-pop fans rallied to call for more diversity on the Great White Way.
AAPI stories and stories by people of color don't seem to be valued as much as others, and audiences don't feel necessarily welcome.
How do you change that?
I think you change it from the top down and the bottom up. Producers, casting agents, people need to be more open, need to understand that these stories, not only do they have value, intrinsically, but they have value monetarily.
In 2021, as Broadway slowly emerged from the pandemic, theater leaders agreed to a new deal for Broadway with reforms focused on equity and inclusion. And since then, a number of shows about communities of color have opened, but many have struggled to stay open. Recently, Ain't No Mo, a play featuring an all-black cast, announced it would be no more, that it would close just 2.5 weeks after opening.
A lot of black folks don't think that Broadway is for us. Why? Because we're not always invited.
The show was extended another week after celebrities like Tyler Perry and Shonda Rhimes bought out entire shows, but a week is clearly not enough.
I'd like to see more focus on sustaining the runs when they're written by people of color, whether that's like really focusing on the marketing, the outreach, the PR to reach out to people who would benefit and enjoy the show.
Broadway writer Felicia Fitzpatrick notes it's not easy keeping a Broadway show open, especially in the wake of COVID. And in January, the industry often does see a winter slump as tourism fades. This month, 12 shows are closing, some planned, others more sudden. But several spectacles are soaring. During the holidays, The Lion King had the highest grossing week in Broadway history. And many others, like Funny Girl and Six, broke house records. All of it gives Fitzpatrick hope.
I truly believe that there are artists and there are supporters of Broadway in general that really want to see change happen and continue to push for more diverse voices on Broadway. So I think we can make it happen. Everyone has to be committed to the work.
And there is more excitement heading into the spring season on Broadway. As always, shows like Sweeney Todd and Camelot are set to hit the stage. Life of Pi and Back to the Future, the musical, will also be making their debuts. So we're kind of preparing for that spring rush with the Tonys coming. So it's a little bit of the haves and have-nots right now, and it just continues to be a conversation. Yeah, we can get those shows that tell different stories on stage, but how do we keep them open?
I love the idea, too, about focus on the marketing. Focus on letting people know that these shows exist and getting them in the seats. But you've seen seen, what, all of them? 90%?
Most. I've seen a good chunk of them, yes.
Oh, good, yeah.
So,
big fans, both of us
exactly,
here. So,
exactly.
Right. Well, we're going to end this hour with a popular new trend on TikTok. It's called CoreCore.
Yeah, as of last week, hashtag CoreCore racked up 322 million views on the app. Now, some users are calling the trend visual poetry, but not all of them are sold on the video editing style just yet.
So NBC News youth and internet culture reporter Callan Rosenblatt joins us for more on this new trend. So
Help
Callan,
us.
I'm going to be honest with you. I've tried reading about this. I still don't quite get it. Can you explain to us what this trend is, how it started, and why people are making this content?
Yeah, so I can try to explain it to you, but even after doing extensive reporting, it is a hard thing to explain. CoreCore takes several videos, essentially a video montage, puts them together, and is trying to evoke not necessarily a narrative or even a specific message, but a feeling. So these videos, what you're seeing on screen, are all the challenges that women face in the world, such as being criticized for their body types or what they look like, having men, want certain things of them. Then these clips that are from social media are juxtaposed with clips of traditional media. So if you notice, there was Margot Robbie's face from I, Tonya. All these clips are put together to evoke what it can feel like to be a woman or a female presenting person in this country or in this world. It's not necessarily meant to relay a narrative, but it's meant to evoke a feeling. And we're seeing this around topics like climate change, topics like the detriments of capitalism. So all these sort of, heavy nihilistic topics are kind of delivered through this video editing style, which has become very popular on TikTok. But again, as I'm communicating it to you, it is a very hard thing to explain.
Yeah, definitely is. So you gave some examples there. How do these types of clips fit in with this larger trend of describing something as core?
Yeah, so just, a little background on core. If you're a big fan of, let's say, Disney, someone on social media may describe you as Disney core. Or if you're a big fan of pottery, jokingly someone might say, oh, that person is so pottery core. Or like if you're the kind of person who has, frog knickknacks and like frog signs all over your apartment or something, you may be described as frog core. This is just a way to describe someone who is like very into a certain topic. So the term core is sort of this cyclical play on this idea of being really into something. It's kind of a joke term, so it's kind of this like inside joke on TikTok, but that's kind of where the term derives from. It's this sort of like being really into something, being really, being sort of predominantly about one sort of idea, and that's sort of what these CoreCore videos are trying to deliver.
Callan, got to be real quick with you here, but does this signal at all that users are looking to TikTok for deeper content?
I think it does. I think these users sort of want to see content that speaks to their daily lives. And also, I spoke to some people who either make CoreCore or are really into the videos. And they said, I have these deep, heavy feelings about the world. I have fears about the future. And this makes me feel like I'm not alone in those feelings. So it's giving people also a sense of community, which is kind of a nice silver lining.
All right, Callan Rosenblatt, thanks so much.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.